Welcome back to Pokemon Platinum. We're in Eterna City, which has the second gym, which we'll be getting starting on this part. Yay! It's a lot of the towns kind of bleed together in this generation.
This generation, I have the hardest time remembering anything about it. I get this in Gen 5, I think. Not Gen 5. I like Gen 5.
6.
Gen 6. This in Gen 6. I remember a town from Gen 6, which is Lumio City, because that's, like, the Paris one, and it's also terrible. But in this, I don't remember most of the NPCs or towns. Like, I remember Rourke as the gym leader. Like, I remember that, but pretty much every other gym leader kind of blends together in my brain. Not really anything about them sticks out. And granted, I know that for people who grew up with this game and played it as much as maybe I played Gen 2 and Gen 1, you know, they're like, oh, well, I can't remember anyone from Gen 2, but I remember everyone from Gen 4. It's like, okay, fair. I feel like I want more of the games to make the gym leaders and their equivalents more impactful, which they tried to do in 5 and to a lesser extent in 7. They kind of did, but it's just like...
Well, at the very least, make them stand out a bit more. Here, they're just kind of, you see the sprite once, and that's it.
They don't impact the story at all in any meaningful way. I feel like the early games have a crutch to hold on to because of the anime. Because the anime was like, so widespread.
There was this whole, I mean, Brock and Misty are with you throughout, like, the entire first season of the anime. And then there's this whole big old storyline with Sabrina. And, yeah, so the Region 1 gym leaders have...
Yeah, Lieutenant Surge is important plot-wise, at least for the couple episodes he's there.
Yeah, like, most of the gym leaders have more than one episode dedicated to them. Like, the only exceptions are, I think, like, Erica and Blaine, I think. So...
Yeah, like, Giovanni is the leader of Team Rocket, so you automatically remember him.
Yeah, exactly. And so Johto, a little bit, doesn't really have that same luxury, but I just kind of feel like I remember those gym leaders more because their fights are so memorable, for the most part, because the difficulty balance is pretty good in that game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, people are going to disagree with me for that, because they're going to be like, oh, the levels are so low for most of the game. But, like, in terms of the Johto gyms, I feel like they're a good mix of challenge and not being BS, you know? Like, they have memorable fights because they have a hard Pokemon in them for the most part. Like, people remember Morty and the Gengar.
They didn't really have to lean so hard on making you level up for the Johto gyms because the difficulty curve of the game was also meant to include the Kanto gyms.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
They spread out the challenge a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it. I mean, granted, Gen 2 still Gen 2's difficulty balance is also a bit odd, though, because that game was trying to be very, very open. So if you were going from point to point and didn't care about exploring the other areas that the game lets you explore, then you're going to be underleveled, pretty much. But if you do go and explore those areas, you're probably not going to have too much trouble, except for the only exceptions, I think, are Claire and Red. Red because he's red, and Claire because there's just nothing good against dragons. So, oh wait, oh look, it's waifu. It's everybody's favorite waifu. Oh man.
Wait, what's her name?
This is Cynthia.
Cynthia, right.
This is Angelica's doll.
Right.
She's the champion, and she's probably, besides Red, the hardest champion.
Yeah.
I like the idea of this Pokemon champion who just randomly decides to help someone out.
I think the Gen 5 champion does a better job. The thing is that to me, she doesn't leave that much of an impact in her scenes throughout the game. Like,
that was kind of bland. She was just sort of there, and she said some stuff, and then she walked away. I don't really...
She pops up from time to time, which makes her better than some of the other champions. Like, the Gen 6 champion is the worst one, easily. because like you see her once before.
I think part of the reason a lot of this is not working out as well as Game Freak would have liked is actually because, like, you remember the logic was like, we have better graphics so we can portray these characters with more than just text. Well, they're not really doing much to portray them with more than just text, are they?
Yeah, and so the text itself is also not any better than it ever has been. So
Yeah.
there's
I mean,
not
like,
really.
when you look at other games that are done this sort of 3D environments, 2D sprites, hybrid style, what kind of games do you think of? Like, the Xenogears, maybe the early Persona games. They had characters that emoted, you know? They had animations that showed you what the characters were reacting to.
Mm-hmm.
So here it's just like, okay, you got a sprite bobblehead that stands there and texts at you, and okay.
Yeah, you see, I'm trying to think of, like, I feel like even in Gen 5, they didn't really have the sprites doing a whole lot. Like, they still kind of just walked around. So they did come up with other things to try to make up for that. Like, at certain points, for example, when you're playing Gen 5, like, and you're talking to, like, N, for example, you'll see, like, big anime art appear on the screen instead of just, like, their overworld text and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, that means that this is serious and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the sprites, the small Pokemon sprites, never really.
Wow. This is like the first time they've done anything with their 3D graphics.
Yeah, they sort of try with the gyms. The Gen 5 gyms, I think, take this concept and do it a little bit better because they're allowed to be a little bit more unique and flashy because the Gen 5 engine is actually good. So, well, okay, I'll put an asterisk on that. I appreciate the effort and ambition that went into the Gen 5 engine. If I'm kind of looking at it objectively, it does look weird in context because the characters still, for the most part, look like the character sprites in this game. And there are still a lot of points where it's the same kind of overhead view for a lot. There's more detail in the background, but it's still it's still rough because it's a DS game trying to do 3D, and all of them looked rough pretty much. But at least they were trying to. I appreciate them trying to push the hardware, I guess is the thing. Especially since Black and White and Black and White 2 came out near the end of the DS's life cycle, and this game came out at the beginning. So, you know, this is them. If this is them, you know, still thinking about, still mostly in a GBA mindset trying to create the world, then Black and White is them being in a DS mindset. And X and Y is them still mostly being in a DS mindset when you think about it, because I don't really like the way X and Y look that much at all.
Yeah, X and Y visually is like, I was like, oh, we're gonna have a fully 3D Pokemon game, and then I looked at the screenshots and I'm like, oh, this sure is a fully 3D Pokemon game. And
it's it's still on a grid is the other thing.
Yeah, and
all the routes are very tile based.
Yeah, and Sun and Moon came out, and it's like, oh, we've finally broken into the PS2 generation. That's great. That's good.
And now we're on to Sword and Shield, and it still looks like a PS2 game.
Yeah, but you know, I can deal with that. It's not an art style that's badly aged. But you know, the point was, in Sun and Moon, you could have like cinematography going on, and
yeah.
It seriously did help me remember the characters for more than just what they say.
Yeah, that I agree with that, because like some of the characters are pretty expressive in Sun and Moon. Like maybe not like Hal, which makes the specific thing about the rival, you know, that Masuda said be a little bit off in my book, but people like Gladion and Guzma and Lucamine and stuff like that, and Lily, you know.
Yeah.
Many of those characters are expressive in gameplay, which helps a whole bunch.
Expressive in gameplay, expressive in story sections. It basically just makes the whole thing feel at least more on the level of an episode of the anime. And I do genuinely like the early seasons of the anime, even if the later ones just kind of spin their wheels for 20 years.
You see,
like,
people say that the Gen 6 season of the anime is legitimately good, and I would love to believe them, but I have no desire to watch that season at all because it's the story from the games that I care the absolute least about. So it's and what's weird is that apparently the Gen 5 season of the anime are really bad, which is also weird because Gen 5 is the one with the good story. So I'm like, okay, that's bizarre.
It's kind of like, okay, after a while the anime just sort of settled on a tone that worked for it, and the Black and White didn't jive with that tone, I guess.
Yeah. Like, there were some elements that did seem like they were trying to be darker from what I've seen. Because, like, apparently in Gen 5 anime, like, Team Rocket is actually serious. Like, not, like, super serious, but they're more of a threat, basically. And they're, like, clashing with the Team Plasma people instead of just fighting with Ash and having a silly scheme and contraption every time and stuff like that. So
Which, probably would have worked in Season 1 of the anime, because Season 1 of the anime had a semi-serious story going on.
Well, I mean, they tried to keep Team Rocket kind of threatening for, like, maybe 10 episodes. But by the time they got to, like, Lieutenant Surge, they were
a joke.
Yeah. I'm talking about just the overall tone of Season 1. Like I mentioned earlier, the storyline with Sabrina, that was, for a kid show, that was pretty good stuff.
Yeah, you see, I don't really know much about the general tone because I haven't watched the anime in years. Like, the last episodes I watched were Gen 3 anime, and even then, I wasn't really watching them. It was something my brothers were watching while I was babysitting them.
It's a little like, okay, the Gen 1 storyline for Pokemon was legitimately pretty good for what they had to work with. It's like they had the Gen 1 storyline to work with, which basically gave them nothing with a side of cheese. So they made up a lot of stuff. They turned the first 2 gym leaders into like tag-along characters, and then they had these long-ass storylines for half the gym leaders, and that was pretty. It was pretty good. They fleshed things out in a way you probably wouldn't have expected of an adaptation of Pokemon at the time.
And there are a lot of legitimately sad moments too, like, or darker moments even, like the backstory for Ash's Charmander, the people still talk about how sad Bye Bye Butterfree made them and stuff like that. And Bye Bye Butterfree is one thing. The episode where Ash trades his Butterfree for some guy's random Raticate, and then there's the montage where he's like, where it's playing like memories of the and then he's on like a wrecked ship trying to find the guy so he can trade him back and stuff like that. It's like, wow. It did some interesting stuff with the themes of Pokemon and the story that existed at the time, which wasn't much. And then there's the ending of the whole Gen 1 story arc where Ash comes in second place instead of winning. And
no, he doesn't even get second. He doesn't even get second. He
doesn't even get second. Oh yeah, he kind of
his big win is that he beats Gary.
Yeah, the point is he doesn't become the champion. And that's where the story ends.
The anime screwed up from there, and because they kept that.
The anime screwed up from there by continuing. It was a perfect place to end. Thematically, it was great, and it should have ended right there. But it just sort of went on forever. And
I think the official theory is that they kept Ash because they didn't want to have to write in an excuse to keep a Pikachu around, pretty much. So
probably, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.